did we actually want to talk about Henry versus Benzema?
Yeah, I think it's relevant now more than ever. So, I mean, I have some thoughts on it. I don't know if you guys do. You don't have
Hey,
to.
you go first. You go first.
Okay. So obviously this comes in the back of Zidane was asked if Karim Benzema was the best striker of all time, and the journalist asking the question actually listed a few French strikers in the history of French football, and Zidane said yes, for me he is. So I don't think he is. On one hand, I understand that Zidane says that because it's actually kind of a debate, if you want. He is one of the most successful strikers in Champions League history. There are 3 who have scored more than him in the history of the competition, which in itself is an impressive feat. We can talk about Henry's World Cup. I think you can also say that Benzema would have won a World Cup had he been in the squad, and he unfortunately wasn't. I think that he certainly has longevity, and I get why Zidane also would say that because he manages Karim Benzema. And look, I think if nothing else, the psychological boost of saying that about your striker is great, and I have no issues with Zidane saying that. But I don't think he's right in saying it in the sense that I just don't think it's factually true. I think there's maybe a case that Benzema. Well, there is. It's not actually a debate. Benzema has way more longevity than Henry. Henry's peak I would say lasted about 10 years. With his actual peak, given that it wasn't at Barca, a little bit shorter. And Benzema's, the way Benzema's age has been way better than the way Thierry Henry has aged. But Thierry Henry's peak is better than Benzema's peak. And, even at the height of like Benzema's playmaking ability, and even having the benefit of playing alongside Cristiano Ronaldo, he wasn't as good of a playmaker as Henry. So to kind of put things into perspective, Thierry Henry, in the season where he scored 32 goals in all competitions, he also had 20 assists in the league alone. That's that's a record in the Premier League. Only Kevin De Bruyne has finally equaled it. It's incredible for and I don't want to blame Thierry Henry a striker. So I won't say he is because he did so much more. But even from a link-up perspective, I don't know if Benzema hit Henry's heights. I think Henry is arguably the best striker of that decade, arguably. Unlucky not to win a Ballon d'Or the year Nedved won it. He's an unbelievable player. I don't think Benzema reached Henry at his peak, but I do think there is a case if we're talking about pure longevity and the way Benzema's aged. So I just thought that was important to put out there.
So I pretty much agree with that. I think Benzema does have a case when you factor in longevity, and I don't think it's something that you just brush aside. I think you balance peak versus longevity, because when we talk about how good players are, in my mind, it doesn't make sense to just take the peak and say that's who's better, because you're not saying, because what you're actually arguing is like 2004 Henry is the best. You're not saying Thierry Henry as a whole is better, right? So if to make the language more precise, right, in these debates, if we just want to take peaks, then just take peaks and say whatever year of Henry was better. But when we talk about Henry, the player, you're naturally, referring to the career as a whole, right? So in terms of that, I do think it becomes somewhat of a debate. I do think career value matters. But in terms of their peaks matched up, I don't think it's that close. I was having a debate with someone on Twitter who just thought Benzema was so far ahead. But to me, Henry, at his best, was one of the most perfect center forwards of all time. He was an incredible dribbler. As Kiyan mentioned, he broke the single season assist record in the Premier League. He was a far better goal scorer than Karim Benzema, across multiple seasons. I do think Benzema's intelligence in terms of being an auxiliary midfielder is a little higher than Henry's, but overall I think Henry's total impact was higher. And I also think he gels better with multiple players, right? With Arsenal, right, he was more of an all-round player, and then he goes to Barcelona and he essentially becomes a left winger slash pseudo kind of second forward running in behind while Messi is kind of the fulcrum. So I think he's a player that fits along so many other profiles of attackers, and just his overall impact was superior within his, prime and whatever that was. But Benzema has had an incredible career. He was better younger than Henry was. It took a while for Henry to get going, and these past couple of seasons has proved that he's going to continue being good for a while. But it's also important to remember, right, that Benzema's had some seasons that take away from his longevity a bit, right? Like the 17-18 season was bad. Like it just 3 non-penalty goals in La Liga, right? Like you just can't brush that aside. 16-17 was definitely not him at his best. So I think it's debate, right? Like I even think if Zidane wasn't saying that just to back up his player, it's not an absolutely outrageous thing to say, right? Like there can be a discussion to be had, but I do understand if that annoys people because, a lot of people will look at Henry at his best, and in my opinion, that's where there's not that much of a debate to me. To me, I take peak Henry every day.
Yeah, I don't have much to add because I agree with you guys, so I don't want to rehash too much. But you mentioned that Benzema was better when he was younger, and I think Benzema was a lot better when he was older too. I think Henry's decline was pretty sharp, and by 32, he was already at New York Red Bull. I mean, at 32, I feel like Karim Benzema is still getting better. So that's the only piece I would add is just when in terms of just his older age as well. I think he's continued to improve and continue to build on those stats.
Yeah, and Benzema also had it took a while for him to get going at Real Madrid too. I mean, his first year wasn't great with the club, even though he was pretty great at Lyon.
Yeah,
and he had a little bit of a bumpy start too, and ultimately we know the whole Mourinho thing and the fire he had to light under Benzema's belly. And, the recency bias may lend us to forget some of those seasons that Owen mentioned, like those 2 seasons from 16 to 18. I also, I have a couple, and I didn't tweet an opinion on this either way. I just tweeted what Zidane said. But there were quite a few Italian football fans chiming into the replies and the mentions that Henry was terrible at Juve. Well, okay, that was so long ago. That was before he joined Arsenal. That's just a different player. I don't think it's fair to bring that into the discussion. But, I at its peak if I had to choose if I had to choose one to play against the aliens in a do or die match, I'd pick Henry. But again, longevity maybe brings a different discussion to this. So ultimately I do agree. It's not that crazy to say, but and I get why Zidane is saying. I just thought it was. I just still think it's Henry, but yeah.